Welcome to Get Serious. I want to go over agricultural exemptions. I think I've touched on them here and there in the past, but this topic came back up for us today with one of the larger parcels that we own. And a lot of folks are familiar with encountering the tax benefit of having an ag exempt property. Usually that just means that there's some type of, as you can imagine, agricultural usage associated with the property that is productive from a commercial sense that effectively allows a tax break on the underlying land to not be taxed at, say, a typically residential or commercial or industrial property would be taxed at. So different counties will have different regulations, but in general, that is how they'll operate across the country. So the property that we own south of Dallas, remarked on this one a number of times, about 50 acres, prime location. We chopped it up into 3 child parcels or allow the parent parcel to be sold because we, hit the Texas minor subdivision, state exemption. It didn't need to go through any approvals. It's just, a survey indicated, hey, we chopped these up, but, the parent parcel could also be sold, and the entire parcel had an ag exemption at the time that we bought it. Interestingly, we missed out on the previous buyers who were under contract with because the property was actually too flat. You can see the previous podcast about that. We've already been getting a ton more activity, including a couple more verbal offers at very solid prices earlier today. I'm still trying to work out those details, but it's still a prime property here. But, as we were going back and forth with my broker for this property, he was like, hey, did we take care of that ag exemption? And it slipped our minds for this, when we were under contract and just thinking, hey, we're going to get this thing sold. I had asked my team to figure out, okay, what's the process to get an ag exemption in this county? And of course, utilizing AI for this. And the response came back that generally you need to file for an ag exemption prior to April 1st of the tax year that you want that exemption. And it didn't indicate, okay, do you need to refile that year after year? So I'm like, oh man, are we about to lose this, key designation on this property? So I called the county right away after that. And it's like, hey, we just missed the deadline. What's the process here? They indicated, hey, there's not going to be an issue. The ag exemption just transfers year over year. You don't need to refile so long as nothing else has changed with the underlying property. And then I asked, okay, well, ownership changed here. And they're like, yeah, not a big deal, but you can submit another form just so you're the name updated for the actual ag exemption. So we're taking care of that today, but it bears worth mentioning, okay, going forward for any properties, that both we have as well as your team might acquire. I mean, it gets busy. Timelines can pass. It's hard to keep track of everything, even if you have, a solid operational setup, which, generally we do have. Is to understand, okay, is a property in our portfolio labeled agricultural, and does it have a tax exemption associated with that? If so, okay, what do we need to do on a yearly basis in case we're holding this for some period of time? Even taking a step prior to that, just so you're understanding, if a property already has an ag exemption from the previous owner, which, probably would be the case if you have an ag exemption upon acquiring it, to figure out, okay, what was the precise ag exemption that we were getting? What were they doing to get that exemption from the county? And so then okay, I just need to carry over this and can set forth your plan to maintain that ag exemption. Again, generally you don't have to do much of anything, if anything at all, for most areas, but you always want to be prepared, okay, because it's a very attractive designation, obviously, to have to pay way less taxes for potentially a really valuable asset. So you want to make sure you don't get caught flat-footed. So ideally, you can figure all that out from the original owner. So then you can just carry over whatever needs to happen once you acquire the property, and then it bears worth mentioning. Hey, reach out to the county. Okay, what is their entire process? Or again, initially use AI to figure out, okay, what are the steps here, and you can always double check on that. To ensure, okay, is there any other paperwork that needs to be done? Property ownership changes to maintain this exemption. Do we need to do anything else? Really figure out those answers. So again, you're not caught in a potentially nastier situation, or just missing out on various deadlines that could actually affect your ability to carry over that exemption. And so I remember when I was talking with our broker before we even purchased this property, okay, to make sure we can carry this over, we did figure out, okay, this particular property was used for hay production. Somebody came on, just took all the hay, boom, move it off. That's all you need to do for ag exempt. That's probably the easiest setup possible, especially if you just have some, base pasture land, just wild grass growing on the property. That is usually going to be probably, the easiest route, especially if there's already a precedent set. But even if there isn't a precedent set, like our broker, I remember, was just indicating, hey, you could, put out a Facebook post or, light advertising. Hey, I got a whole bunch of hay on 50 acres out here, and you're just going to get a ton of responses right away. And for somebody to just take care of that, and especially if the county was more vigilant and they're going to pass by the property and ensure that agricultural usage is maintained, then, at least you have a process in place to account for that. And I'm not sure if that would be just a random check, or they would send notice, hey, we're going to schedule a viewing of this property so you could set up the actual agricultural usage. You'd have to figure that out from the county. Again, if precedent is already set, most rural places are going to be pretty lax about this anyway. And so that was an avenue that we're okay, this is probably the easiest one. That's already what the property was being used for. Or if they, want, an even more visual proof that we're using agricultural property, the broker's hey, I know somebody in the area that has a whole bunch of cattle, and he could, take them over for a day, let them graze, etc. And then, haul them back, set up kind of a temporary usage, again, just for, the appearance, hey, this is still active agricultural usage. So we had a couple different strategies and tactics that we could have utilized depending on how, again, vigilant the county might have been, especially with a property transfer. But fortunately, I was kind of kicking myself, man, we missed a deadline here. This is a key property. What's going to happen? But they're yeah, don't worry about it. But always better to be prepared prior to that and before acquiring any property with an ag exemption. Again, go through all those steps and have various plans and steps that you can take to ensure that you won't lose out on that ag exemption. Unless, of course, that is your intention to potentially do a lot more value add and horizontal or vertical development that is going to trigger a release of the exemption anyway. So you're going to have to determine that on a case-by-case basis. But usually you want to save that for the buyer. And so then they can pay any the various rollback taxes that might come back into play in situations like that. So with all of that in mind, if you're looking for funding, seriousland.capital, zero cost review of your land deals at Land Daily Diligence Facebook group, and landpricer.ai. Just knocked out a whole bunch more. Our comp scraping tool is nearly done. A few more bug fixes, aiming to get those out of the way by next couple days here. And we are rocking and rolling. And subscribe and share, everybody. Take care now. Bye.